I'm Nathan James of Scatter. Why don't we just start introducing yourself? You want to go first?
Hello, I'm Jesus Chitty from EOS Argentina. I'm really happy to be in this panel talking about RAM. I think RAM issue is not only technological, but it's also philosophical and an economic subject. So I am really glad to be here. Thank you, Nathan.
I am Michael Yeates from EOS Stack. We're very interested in the RAM price because we're different from other BPs. We actually will need RAM to operate. If we don't get enough RAM, we will not be a DAC, so it's very interesting to us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Daniel Zhang from Chaince Exchange. We are the world's first exchange that focuses on EOS ecology. And also, since we talk about RAM today, so maybe you have heard about the account named CUCME1. It's also the world's second largest account, the RAM holder in the world. And also is occupied by Chaince CEO and his partners, including me. So I think I'm very glad to be here, introduce more about our opinion about RAM. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eyal Hertzog. I'm a co-founder at Bancor and a product architect. And also with LiquidEOS, which is the block producer created by Bancor. Bancor is today one of the largest, most popular decentralized application on Ethereum. We process millions of dollars per day on our decentralized liquidity network. And RAM is also very important for us for that reason, because we want to use EOS. We came from a dApp developer perspective to this whole thing.
So you guys all know about RAM, obviously. You've done your due diligence. How would you explain RAM to people who come from other blockchains? And who needs it the most? Is it the developers? Is it the users? And when is that interchangeable?
Everyone is talking here about the, I saw a slide about the transaction per second of EOS, which is amazing, right? We don't see those numbers without the blockchains. And I think, RAM is the reason that we can do that, because EOS is built in such a way that they're doing all the transaction in memory. However, this is a very scarce resource and very expensive one. And this is why it's important to allocate it in the best optimal way in order to allow, on one hand, those amazing performances that I think are, what's going to take blockchain to the mainstream. It's as important as that on the one hand. On the other hand, we're dealing here with a resource which is different, and we need to learn how to manage it in the most optimal way.
Actually, there are many people, they want RAM, and there are many people, they need RAM as well. I would say, for developers, they need RAM to develop those dApps and other things. And for example, like our Chaince, we got our own tokens named CET. We do the airdrops to every EOS holders worldwide. And this kind of airdrops, when the RAM price is not that high, it still costs about more than 2,000 of EOS. So currently many people will say that RAM price is too high, and those airdrop projects, they cannot afford it. So the first, developers need it. And second part also, there are more people want RAM. They are not developers, they are just focused on price, and they care about the price. They want to earn more money. Why there are so many people come to talk about RAM? It's because, the price line goes up like this, and then price drop like this. So if there is no this kind of line, there won't be so many people care about it. So I would like to divide this topic into two parts. The first is developers, they really need it, and second part is the traders, they want to earn money.
Okay, so RAM is memory, which means that if you access something today, you need to remember it for tomorrow. So that's very important for your token balances, because you don't want them to disappear tomorrow. So everybody uses RAM. People mainly focus on the developers using the RAM, but actually a particular dApp can choose between paying for the RAM themselves, and they can also ask the users to supply the RAM. So in the case of tokens, actually the users pay for the RAM. It's not necessarily the dApp that pays for the RAM.
Once they touch it.
once they have transferred it to somebody else. Yeah, it's a little bit complicated, but it's not always the dApp developer who pays. So RAM is actually a problem for everybody, especially as we go on and we go 1 to 2 years into EOS. We may find that the users themselves are actually running out of RAM and having to pay for RAM just to use the system. So it's important for everybody, not just airdroppers.
Yeah, well, like Michael said, RAM is where the data is stored. So I basically see two groups of people that are interested in RAM, even though everybody uses it. So you have the regular accounts that need RAM to store, their account name, balance, and so on. The default value is 8 KB to, where account is created, but it can be run with a bit less than that. Those users, it's arguable if the RAM price is currently high or not if you compare it with other blockchains, right? Because you will pay maybe $13 now, but then you won't pay transaction fees. You probably won't need it compared to maybe Bitcoin that you'll pay $1 or $2 per transaction. So you'll make 5-6 Bitcoin transactions and you already covered the price of RAM in EOS. But then you have another group of people that are developers. And that's the group of people that we want, and maybe the group of people that we are concerned about, because they use, they need to store tables and other stuff on the blockchain, and they might need a lot of RAM, which could get quite pricey.
So following that, with the price of creation for users, we know that it is a little bit of a problem right now. It has reached, 3 EOS to create an account at some point. And when we're talking about the blockchain, we actually want to affect change in places where they're, quote unquote, the unbanked. Who would sustain that cost, and how could the block producers possibly help countries that need it the most?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I was talking to Eyal from EOS Nation, and they do a lot of meetups, and they provide in Nigeria and other poor countries, they provide the assistance to create accounts. I think it is something that block producers could do, not only create accounts, but there is also other available services. Cryptolions also talked about creating a token as a service, or even helping with airdrops. And that's another issue, airdrops, that we could talk later, because there are ways to use, less RAM and be more RAM effective. And BPs have an important role to teach developers to use as little RAM as possible. Let's remember that RAM is not is a resource that you can recover once used, so it becomes an asset. It's kind of like a property, because RAM has a value with the current system. So yes, you spend a lot of money on RAM, but then that RAM is yours. You can either sell it or you can use it on other dApps, and that's also an important factor to consider, because we need to clear out the noise from the media and stuff. It's important to understand how RAM works and what it is, because it's not like you buy a house and then you spend a lot of money in the house, but then you have a house, you have a property, you have an asset. So that's also an important factor to consider when talking about the RAM price.
I think that regarding use cases like banking the unbanked and all that, I think those use cases actually fit perfectly to the solution like sidechains. We're actually ourselves we're studying a project of community currencies in Kenya, and obviously they cannot pay even Ethereum transaction fee, because 50 cents is like half of their daily salary for a single transaction. That doesn't make any sense. But we're working with a company called POA Network that is actually using.
That's a great name.
Yeah, and they have a side chain, and obviously there's no transaction fees there. So I think for those use cases, that will be probably the solution. Having said all that, I think that as much as we raise the barrier to how much it costs to to launch an application on EOS, then it means that we'll have less and less applications and less and less use cases that make sense financially, and we don't want to do that. Now, you said RAM is like it's like an asset, right? So I buy RAM and then I can sell it. There is an issue with that, because I cannot rent RAM. If I could rent it, it wouldn't be such a problem. But it's impossible today. So imagine a real estate market where everyone can buy houses. Everyone that want to develop an application can buy houses, but people can buy houses just for investment. And if you cannot rent the house, then all the houses that were bought as an investment, because people believe that the price will go up in the future, they will stand empty. This is really bad resource utilization. So I think that. Thank you. So I think there are solutions for that, and we should strive for a solution for that, and strive to make sure that the resource utilization is high, as high as possible, without without hurting the free market principle. And there are ways to do that. Like you could have a property tax on a house, making it a bad long-term investment. Right. It can be a good short-term, but not a good long-term. And I think this is where we should focus our efforts.
So on the note of sidechains, I think they are definitely a long-term scaling solution when we start to hit limits. But at the moment, I don't think we should be looking at that until we've sorted out the problem on the current chain. Otherwise, we're just going to give speculators another bite of the cherry.
We could end up having the same problem across chains.
Sorry?
We could end up having similar problems across chains.
We would have the same problem on the cross-chain because the Banker algorithm is so predictable. We know that we just buy more and it will automatically go up, and we're going to hit an inflection point where it just goes to the moon, and we're all
Don't say
good.
that word here.
Yeah, sorry.
I would say that sidechain and also the renting, they are all good options, and also they deserve a lot of discussion, a lot. And I would like to provide another view from another aspect, because since Chaince, we are not a BP, we are exchange, and we are the world's first use-focused exchange. I would say Chaince is the world's first that can support the real RAM trading in the exchange. It's a very meaningful thing. Why about that? Because for normal people, if you want to buy RAM, you need at least has a wallet, and it will take about $30 US dollars to open an account. But if you can trade RAM in the exchange, you can save this kind of money. And also, we can support the trading pairs of RAM and EOS, and combine this with what I just mentioned. I mean, the real RAM trading and buying. You have the listing function to trade RAM very easily, just as you buy any other kind of tokens. And why I say it's meaningful? Because it can lower or even make the entry barrier disappears for normal people. Because we all know that the money or the people's attention about RAM is still low compared with, there are almost 1 billion use outside. So, I mean, this kind of thing can attract more people to care about use, to care about RAM. And also, this kind of thing will accelerate the process. I mean, the RAM price and also this development will move to a balance.
That's also a double-edged sword, because it keeps the focus on the volatility of the RAM and brings in the speculators while the rest of the network suffers, in a sense, the dApp developers and whatnot.
Volatility is almost worse than the price, because if you make a business plan today, you will factor in the cost of your business, and then you actually raise the money, and then it's tripled or quadrupled in price.
And there has been airdrops which have stopped in the middle and haven't had even the chance to continue since they stopped.
I believe ADD ran out of RAM.
Also,
quickly.
yes.
Yeah.
Here's a hard question. The airdrops cost a lot of money. Is that a bad thing?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Well, I don't think so. Because I just mentioned that our Chaince token, CT, will cost about 2,000 to 3,000 use. Well, it's a big amount of money, for sure. But is that a bad thing? I don't think so. Because if the cost is very, very low, there will be so many airdrops, and they will attract your attention, and turn out to be no meaning and no value. And that will attract a lot of attention from us. So I think why they design the RAM or the use price at this level, because they don't want so many low quality and bad things happens in use ecology. There are many other choices for what I just mentioned, kind of the apps. They can choose sidechain, they can choose cost a lower price to do the airdrops and other things. So I think keep the RAM on maybe at today's level is good thing, because it can help us only accept good dApps airdrops.
Yeah, well, this is actually very interesting, right? Because we are currently 35 days in, so in the kind of price discovery phase, so we don't know as to what would be that threshold, that they're talking about that threshold, that, who decides what the threshold is or not, We enter this philosophical discussion, and that's why the RAM, is so interesting. We are currently working with our team to put out ways in which you can do airdrops, which probably will take longer, but you can consume less RAM. Why do airdrops consume so much RAM? Because you need to store all the data from the accounts on blockchain so that they can be claimed, right? There could be some ways around it that could make it cheaper. Either way, I believe that there is the BP role to provide this service to filter. They could filter the projects that are worthwhile, and then we're getting paid for especially this, to provide adoption in the EOS blockchain. So this could be a very, very interesting service that I am hoping that many VPs can come up and say, we'll provide this as a service and we will do it effectively. You can roll them out in batches. For example, you can roll out, in batches so that it doesn't consume so much RAM. So it is very interesting, and I believe the VPs have to intervene so that it's a bit cheaper. Because right now, if you want to do an airdrop to all the Genesis accounts, I think it's around 10K EOS, which is quite a lot of money. And the blockchain keeps growing, so it would actually be much more expensive if you want to do an airdrop to all the accounts at the moment.
Yeah. So can I just say about airdrops? We don't just airdrop just for marketing purposes or as a gimmick. We really believe that the distribution of the ownership and the control of dApps within the ecosystem is incredibly important. And people see an airdrop as some sort of like junk mail that comes into your inbox, but actually we store it in our database. We just put your name next to it. So we're not like throwing things at you. The wallets, Igor, are to blame because they do not filter. At the moment, they're just showing every single airdrop. And yeah, you're right, they could get out of control. You could have hundreds of thousands of spam tokens appearing in your wallet. So I think that's a user interface problem which will be fixed fairly soon.
I think, yeah, I agree with you. It is a matter of balance, and we don't want to. Airdrop can be used in I would say funny way because if you airdrop a lot of tokens to a lot of users that have no idea what this token is and don't care. So first of all, it's going to show your market cap much higher than it really is because most of the holders, they don't care about it. But I think that maybe there is a room to think about a system which is more proactive. So yeah, you have a great project, tell everyone about project. Let's have like an airdrop site where people can go and engage and say, oh, I'm interested in this and this and this, and they will pay for what needs to be paid in order to get that because, they care about it. So maybe it should be a little bit more proactive, but, we're really in the beginning, and airdrop is really, I would say, essential part of how EOS business model was designed. So we're yet to see where this thing going.
And we've seen a couple people do this already. There's air grabs, thank you Said from EOS Cafe, who you can have users claim their own RAM in the row, in the table, and then the dApp doesn't have any cost for the airdrop. So there is ways around this. There's also ways for RAM lending by changing public keys to somebody else and such. But we're not there yet. Still a little bit of work.
So an air grab is you're just passing the cost of the RAM on to the user.
The users.
Yeah.
However, the benefit of that is that you only get the users who want your tokens.
That's true, and actually if the users continue to accept the airdrops or air grabs, they themselves will run out of RAM.
Right.
And then they will have to have the same problem that we're having, and they're going to have to fork out 10 EOS or whatever for their RAM, which for an average
can't happen
user,
continually.
it's quite a lot, sorry?
It can't actually happen continually. It has to be snapped at one point and then stopped.
Yeah.
What do you think because everybody states that there's an issue with RAM. What do you think the actual issue is? Is it just volatility? Is it just that it costs too much? Is it just that it makes it hard to get people into the system? Or is there something more here?
I think you should not allow speculation in a finite and required resources.
Fundamental.
Yeah, you should not allow this because sure, if people think, oh, there's going to be so much application discovering, developers discovering EOS, and they want to move over, and they want to buy, they'll need to buy RAM, and if someone predicts that and buys the RAM in advance, it's actually making this future less probable because it makes it more expensive for everyone to do that. And I think that is and the main problem is that there is no price for this speculation. There's a little fee that you pay when you trade, but developers pay the same thing. And LiquidEOS came up with this proposal to actually burn EOS from that contract. Now, burning EOS is like airdropping EOS on all the users, economically speaking. It's the same thing. So essentially, whoever holds RAM at every given moment is essentially paying rent for that RAM to the entire community, which I think would make it much less of appealing of an investment, and that would take the prices down. And if we wouldn't have anything like that, you should expect people to make that investment because that is the right thing to do financially for them, and you shouldn't expect anyone to care about how much RAM. I mean, any speculator, he shouldn't care about how much RAM will cost to the application developers. That's not his job. That's our job to think about that. So.
Well, I actually think it's a very interesting issue, RAM, because it's not only one point to consider. Because on the one hand, it's a scarce resource, right, at the moment. So that makes it, of course, that makes it valuable in a way. Of course, it has a price and it's valuable to some people, for some people more than others. But then there is also another issue about information of VPs and people who make the decision of when to increase RAM, of what to do with RAM, and that decision and how that could affect price and insider trading and so on. And that's probably another thing that should be addressed. I would love to hear. There is a couple of proposals. I've heard from third parties the LiquidEOS proposal. I think it's really interesting. I would like to see it like probably more formally, especially when does. The timing of when those RAM, those EOS get burned, because it's all about it. That's also a sensitive information, and that's something I would like to know. We haven't spoken privately, but I've heard something about that proposal. There's also a supply decision of when to increase the RAM supply. I don't think that's a decision that should be made, prematurely. It needs to be decided. But eventually, 64 gigabytes of RAM is not going to be enough. So eventually, we're going to have to increase the supply. And when we make that decision, of course, it's going to have an impact in price if we keep the Banker algorithm that we have now, like the free market algorithm.
Yeah. Okay. This gentleman just mentioned about speculation about RAM. Well, people may be afraid or they don't like this kind of words. But I would say the speculation is the core or maybe the key motivation and also the incentive of so many things, especially in financial market. There is a saying in traditional China that if you want to stop something, compared with stop, you better find a way out for this kind of thing. I think it's the same rule for the speculation, because people always want to think about some rules, stop all the speculation about RAM. But I think why don't we find another way to help those people who like speculation? They can also understand the risk behind that, and they can to try or play this kind of game. For example, like DRAM, this kind of thing, the derivatives can help those people like speculation find their own place. And this DRAM can also help to balance the fluctuation of the RAM price. So I think this may be another way to think about this question.
Yeah, I agree that speculation is important, but if you Google like why speculation is good in Google, the first result will be Investopedia. I believe that's the site, and they give a good example that is very very easy to understand. They say, let's say there is a drought. And everyone is expecting the oil price, not the oil price, the price of rice to go up. So that would make speculator buy rice futures. And they will buy those futures, and then the farmers will see the price of the future. They will, oh, maybe we should grow more rice. So they're actually fixing the supply side of the market by being speculative. That's a good thing. But notice that I say rice futures. They don't need to buy actual rice and make people hungry. They need rice futures. And that is part of our suggestion of LiquidEOS to allow RAM futures. So, we know that we're going to upgrade the network. Let's say we decide we're going to upgrade in a few months. And there's a market where people can buy this future RAM that we're going to have and not pay any tax on it. And not, and in that RAM, the price will remain constant. So you don't pay rent on the future RAM, but you only pay rent on actual existing RAM. So I think there is room for speculation, and that speculation is also important for application developers that know that they will have their application ready in 6 months. So they can buy RAM futures and use it in 6 months. So I think there's room for that. We should allow that. And there would not be a problem with speculation if it was rentable, because then it would mean that we'll have to, this is a technical problem we're dealing with, that you cannot rent RAM. So what can you do? You need to get to higher utilization, and that's why I think we should split it to two different markets.
The problem with the renting is at some point you have to evict people who don't pay, and the data is actually worth a considerable amount of money to others rather than the renter or the leaser. So it can have a wide effect.
I'm not saying that we should allow renting. I'm just saying this is the reality. We cannot rent RAM. We need to find another solution.
Well, the rent itself could be paid by the system as a whole via fees on trading.
I agree. I'm saying because you cannot practically rent it from one to another, what we have now is speculating, holding RAM that is not being utilized. If it was theoretically possible, then at least we would get to a high utilization, which is what it's all about. It's about allowing as many decentralized applications as we can.
Yeah, it's really interesting what Eyal was saying, because we can't rent it on chain, but it's exactly what I was talking about at the beginning, that it would be interesting to have a service where it doesn't have to be a BP, where an entity buys a lot of RAM or can create an account, buy a lot of RAM. So it can provide you the service of doing an airdrop. You can provide the parameters of the token you want to create, and then the airdrop will be created. This is just an idea, like we just, that it could be done. Or you could create an account with RAM and keep the owner key, so you can change the owner key after that RAM is utilized. But that will, of course, depend on the private entities of creating this. Ideally, we want it to be on the blockchain. Just one quick thing I wanted to say about speculation, and I think we also have to be fair with people that speculated on the system. And when I say we, I mean the EOS ecosystem, because at the beginning this was something that was allowed, and the rules were set, so you use the Bancor algorithm to buy and probably make money afterwards. So a lot of people bought RAM expecting future returns because it was allowed, and that's how the system was laid out. Now we want to, of course, control this because it got out of hand, and we want to probably push down the price of RAM. But I think there is a pinch of our own fault, because at the beginning this was something that was allowed, and many people were probably even incentive to buy RAM, hold RAM, because they were told that the price would go up.
It became a game, and a fun game at that, and people got hooked, and they kept playing.
Yeah, that's the story of crypto.
So this is true. A lot of people played the game, and a lot of fees were taken. And at some point, the largest holder, if something isn't done, is going to be the RAM fee account. So what do you guys think should actually be done with all of those funds that were accrued from fees?
Fees on the RAM trading?
Fees on the RAM trading.
Yeah, I believe they are burned, right?
No, they're actually on the EOSRio .RAM fee.
Right.
I think that's one of the good things that's come out of all of this. We're taking a lot of EOS out. We don't, again, I will insist, and I've seen other BPs say the same, like Eyal from EOS Nation, There's only been 35 days, and it seems like it's been a year. Decisions need to be made with, a lot of prior consultation and debate. And I believe one of the most important things to get done, like it's been said before, is the referendum contract. Because at the moment, it's like BPs deciding on issues as important. I think it has more than 1.5 million EOS, maybe, that account. I haven't checked recently. But this is something that definitely should be decided by the community and not by 15 BPs.
It's the one thing that I actually believe should take a year.
For sure, for sure. But at the moment, it's a good thing that is being taken out of the market.
I would disagree with that, I think. I think that we should allow time for debate. There should be time for everyone to present their proposals and the pros and cons. And then we just need to make some proposals and we sign it or we don't sign it. We're beholden to our voters, and if we do things that they don't like, they definitely tell us. They're not shy about telling us when they're upset when we do things. So I think we need to give it maybe another couple of weeks. I think we're going to see 2 or 3 proposals, actual code, which we can make a signed proposal for. And then all the BPs will just decide which one they prefer, and they will sign one or the other. And if something passes 15, it gets activated.
Well, 0.5% is quite a high number. I mean, especially for, this game keeps going, and the fees and all these fees will goes up. So, this kind of money comes from the EOS ecology, comes from every trader, every RAM holders. So I think probably this kind of money should be used back to the EOS ecology. Maybe personally, I think education is a good choice. Let more people know the risk behind the RAM. Let more people know about EOS ecology and all the things. And I think maybe a good choice. And also I agree that there should be as more as possible proposals for people to think about that, because this deserves a very careful discussion to make sure, it's kind of influence in quite a long time.
So, yeah, I think that
We have about 1 minute, so
burning EOS is a form of payment to the entire community. So that I would consider that as the default, right? Because who owns EOS? It's like everyone that hold EOS tokens, and then then burning them is like airdropping them. So that's if there's anything else we want to do, then obviously it can be proposed and discussed, but that should be the default route.
Absolutely. Let's give a hand for all these guys who are working really hard on RAM.
Thank you. Thank you.